You're calling them unlawfully. Hold on, can you hear me clearly?
Yes, I can.
1 second. Everything's recording on my end. Perfect. How you doing, African superstar?
I'm doing good, mate.
Yeah.
Good to really connect with you. I know we've been trying for a very long time.
I know, it's definitely been a while. It's definitely been a while, especially with the times we're going through right now. Everyone seems to be extraordinarily busy or just running around a lot and trying to get things done.
Definitely.
Yeah. What do you prefer to be called, Gino or the African superstar?
Anything is fine.
Anything is fine. I'll stick with African superstar. I love the name, by the way.
Cheers.
Yeah. What's the origins of the name, if you don't mind me asking?
Actually, the name was given to me by friends years ago. Yeah, because obviously you can hear I originally lived in America.
Yeah.
So I had always a zest for the motherland, and I was always like very Pan-African and things like that, pro-Black centered.
Yeah.
So I had a lot of African friends, migrants, and they just were like shocked that because I was originating from America, that I had this like deep interest in the continent. So that was the name that they gave me, and it's grown and become my brand, and so on and so forth.
Amazing. And it's kind of similar experience I've had as well, because what tends to happen is us in the diaspora, we tend to then have more of an interest of back home. So our research into it and our love for it and our reading into it becomes a bit more in-depth than those who actually live it and it's their day-to-day normal experience.
Absolutely.
So I definitely understand where the enthusiasm and the love comes from, because
we're socialized not to have an interest. A lot of people back on the continent don't know that. They ask that question. Oh, why don't Black Americans come back to Africa? People in Europe, the people that are brought up there don't seem interested. But we are socialized to not have that interest.
Yeah.
And I think for me, I was kind of separated a lot from the mainstream media. Growing up, I did more reading and I was more into music.
That's good.
So I didn't get a lot of that exposure per se that made me have a negative connotation towards the continent. So.
Okay. Do you know where in the continent you originate from? You haven't looked into it?
Yeah, my family line goes back to Cameroon.
Cool.
So, that's where officially. But I have a serious affinity to Ghana, and I travel to Ghana very, very often. I also do business in Ghana and Kenya. I've been to 6 countries total across the continent currently, including Tanzania, Egypt, Nigeria, South Africa, as well as Kenya and Ghana.
Yeah.
But I grew up with a lot of Ghanaians in my area where I was living in the States. I was living in Columbus, Ohio.
Okay.
Which is a huge hub for like the Ghanaian community. They have
I thought the Ghanaians were in New York.
there are many cities where there are a lot of them, but they have a big community as well in Columbus, Ohio. Yeah. So they really were kind of my window to the continent before I began traveling, and really had cultivated that interest because they're a warm people, beautiful culture, inviting, and they gave me. I had that desire because of my friendships with Ghanaians in America. So they've always shown me a lot of love across the world, especially in Ghana. So
seems to be your second home now.
Yeah, that's where I actually had plans to spend an extended amount of time over there this year, but thanks to coronavirus, everything has been put on hold. So
tell me about it. I mean, absolutely everything. I was supposed to have been there now myself as well, but I was fortunate enough to spend Christmas and New Year there before coronavirus hit, and ever since then we all kind of just been trapped in our houses and unable to travel. So how are you coping with the whole coronavirus situation and isolation and lockdowns?
I think obviously there's a bigger agenda. I think there's a bigger agenda, most definitely, and I'm just praying for the opportunity to kind of get back to the continent and still go forward with the plans that I was working on. I don't think they're being forthright. They keep giving us little information here and there. I think that this lockdown will extend much longer than what they're alluding to.
Oh yeah, most definitely.
We think in a couple weeks. I think originally President Trump said by Easter they were.
Oh yeah, he said Easter everyone's going to be in church, aren't we?
Yeah. And I mean, and then you like pay attention to what's going on in Ghana. President Nana Addo, he's given free electricity and water for 3 months.
Yeah.
So, why that time? So I think they definitely will extend it through the summertime. Consequently, I don't know if you've noticed, but I know in my area, 5G towers are going up at the same time. I have some friends in the U.S. saying 5G is also getting installed in their neighborhood. So I think that there's a connection with this global shutdown and then being able to get their network up. So they were having a lot of pushback from the community as they were installing them by normal practices, people protesting, people resisting them going up. So what better way to be able to install it in peace with the people being restricted, no air travel, no work, no and in some places they have the military. In America, they have a National Guard, which is like their local military deployed to kind of keep people in their homes and enforce curfews and things like that so that they can be busy at night putting these towers up.
It was strange because when I first started noticing the work happening, I was like, well, is this a part of essential works? Because apparently the only people that are supposed to be working are the essential workers and service providers. So it was a bit strange, but I mean, as they always say, the truth will always unveil itself regardless of what's going on in the dark. So it will be interesting to see what happens, because I was having an interesting conversation with a virologist, Dr. Hakim Jabala, recently. I just released a podcast yesterday, actually, and then we were discussing the failings of the government and how it's going to be very difficult for them to regain our trust after all of this, because there's people having to bury their relatives, family members, like fathers, mothers, and you're unable to say goodbye to those people, and they're being kind of put in holes in the ground, like in mass graves, as is happening right now in New York. And all these atrocities are going to cause major trauma and distress to people in the long run. And it's going to be completely difficult for any of these individuals to forgive the government and to forgive the authorities for what they're doing to the people. I mean, at the moment, they're kind of suppressing all the emotions and all the issues because everyone's on lockdown. But once those lockdowns do get lifted, or if they do get extended too much, what's going to happen? Like, what's the reactions going to be from the public? So it's really interesting times.
I'm so happy you actually touched on that, because that ties into obviously the original topic of our conversation. I reached out to Francis many months ago wanting to kind of talk about that this, even prior to this, the diaspora should be putting their sights on the motherland. And I think for us, this should be and is for a lot of people a wake-up call. The security of us residing here and having our whole life and things like that is not wise. The fact that we often leave our homelands naked and vulnerable to these foreign powers and things like that. I've seen a lot of people, because I try to be a balanced critic.
That's the best way to be, though.
I see things are going on back home, but I have a lot of empathy to our family back home, because I realize that their media and education is omitting important things. They don't have an understanding of what's going on in the West. They don't get the exposure. Their education completely omits the Europeans' long impact on our continent. So a lot of times they're just growing up and they don't even know what's happening. Those of us that are outside have a more well-rounded view, especially those of us that have schooled or traveled. We see a bit more of the bigger picture and how this thing is all tying in. And one of our critical failures is not depositing our skill sets back home. A lot of foreigners, when they go abroad for education or they go for business, they make sure to invest back home so that in a case of an emergency, I mean, look at the diaspora right now. I gave the analogy on my channel, which any of you viewing, I have a YouTube channel called The African Superstar with a K, not a C.
I have the details all in the description as well.
I welcome you to come over and see, check out my platform. But I spoke to my channel the other day and said, for the African diaspora that's in America, right now they can't fly. They can't get home. How are they going to get across the ocean? We have not even prepared. There's no Black-owned or African-owned ocean liners. There's no type of backup plan if we need to get out of these Western countries to get home.
Half the airlines are shut down as well anyway.
Exactly. So that's my point. It's like we literally have just, existed in these environments without preparing for tomorrow, without even building up our homelands. We see what's happening in China as far as the Africans being evicted from their homes and getting blamed for bringing coronavirus to China.
Yeah.
We've been the recipient of this connotation in these nations, and we have still failed to develop our homelands and make it a place where we can say, you know what, you don't want us here, that's cool, we can go back home. You know, our home has the comforts, our home has the conveniences. We've been, you know, siphoning the resources of the West and depositing them back home like other foreigners do. So now I think this is a huge wake-up call to our people. If they have not been trying to reestablish themselves back home, that they should be considering that, because being here is not nearly as stable as it has the image of appearing. We can see they shut down these countries under a month. They stop travel, they close borders, they revoke visas, you know, they stop work, stop school, and enforce curfews and everything. So it can easily crumble these societies. And I mean, at least at home, you know, you can have land, you can have a property, you can grow food, you know, you can do agriculture. Here in the West, we're completely trapped. We get our food from the grocery store.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. Which comes from a factory. Yeah.
You know what I mean? We can't live outdoors if we need to. The weather's too cold, you know. In terms of like off-grid, living off the land survival, our potential is much higher back home where we come from than these environments. So that's what I really wanted to talk about today. You know, turning your sights home.
Most definitely, it's a really interesting topic, and it covers so many various areas. But some of the things that I sort of, whenever I think about the diaspora going back home, there's a lot of questions that come up in my mind. First thing is, how do they function in an environment they're not used to? So, for instance, let's say you're speaking to someone who wasn't born I was born in Ghana, by the way. So, but I left Ghana at a really young age. I left Ghana when I was, I think, about 5 years old. I moved to Sweden, lived there for about 9 odd years before I moved here to the UK. So I've been here for nearly 20 years now, or 20 years plus. Is someone who's never been to Africa wanting to go back there, how do they prepare for such a trip then?
Well, obviously, I mean, right now we're in an unknown situation, you know. I would always say, and what I've been previously promoting is a proactive approach, you know, which is you have to create that connection or establish those networks. Obviously, you know, I migrated, actually, I didn't mention, but I migrated from America to here in the UK about 3 years ago. Before I migrated here, I used to come to England every year. You know, I made it a point to come every year to kind of acclimate myself to the environment. And so I would say, obviously, people that are disconnected, it goes without saying that you're going to have to reestablish that connection. I wouldn't advise anyone to just pick up and move to a place.
Yeah, the culture should be immense.
I mean, even if you're here in the UK, you know, it would be rare for you to just pick up from London and move to Birmingham or move to Manchester. You don't know anybody there. You don't know. So obviously that was the method that I would recommend is being proactive. You know, if you're in a position traveling there, establishing relationships with people in that community, maybe where you live, you know, to give you an understanding. And that's the beauty about the African diaspora, which is, it is a huge network. If you make friends with people in your local area and you say, hey, look, I'm looking to travel to Kenya. I'm looking to travel to Nigeria. I want to go to your country. Do you know somebody who can show me around? Do you know somebody who does travel? You know, I've never yet met an African from back home and say, do you know somebody? And they say, no, I don't know anybody. You know, that's here in the West. You know what I'm saying? Back home, people know everybody. Fix your car, do your hair, transportation, a place to stay, you know, the whole nine. And usually I've received nothing but hospitality across the continent. And every place I first visited, I was a solo traveler. So, you know, I established those connections, and me not being born in Africa, you know, me having to create those things. So if you want that to happen, that is what you're going to need to do is reassociate yourself with the continent one way or another. Right now, obviously, you can't pick up tomorrow and travel there. That would be the most formidable thing to do, is go there. Because people in the diaspora, like I said, they're socialized to have a negative connotation of the motherland. And so therefore, they're going to have all these stereotypes and preconceived notion, and they have to get rid of
it's the Western view of history as well. So you're studying your own homeland through the lens of someone else and their experience is completely different to what the reality possibly may be, or what the true experience of the people may be. So,
and any person who wants to be versed on a topic is going to make themselves. They need to have that actual experience for themselves.
Yeah.
You know, when people go to school to become medical doctors, they don't practice. You know, they don't get their license without practicing, without interning, without having some exposure to medicine, how it works, surgical procedures, and et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, when people have a concept of the motherland, in order for that to be balanced, they should have a personal, you know, experience to speak from, not, you know, Marcus Garvey and Malcolm X and Kwame Nkrumah. You need to have that experience for yourself. And that's actually how, you know, I've put myself in a position as an authority on this subject, because before I went to the motherland, there will be people say, oh, well, you've never been there, you don't know. You know, now a lot of those people, African migrants, actually, I've gone to more countries than they have been to.
You've been to more African countries than I've been.
Exactly. So, you know, now I can say, because the next thing was, oh, well, you've been there, it's only like that there. So I made sure, okay, I'm going to the North, East, South, and West. And make sure I've experienced a little bit of all the different regions. So when I talk about hospitality, for instance, you know, I'm speaking from being a female solo traveler, going to all points of the continent, spending, you know, at least 2 weeks in each place. And again, not having any direct tie. So I can speak from a point of experience. So when people want to try to debunk various things, I can simply say to them, well, have you tried? Oh, no, I haven't. My friend's been there. Well, then we can't have the conversation.
Do you get asked different questions from the British diaspora as compared to the American? Because I know you guys have a completely different experience to race and back home than we do.
I mean, typically not really from the British diaspora, because fortunately here people travel.
First generation as well. So.
And I think the relationship that the diaspora to the continent is a lot more direct here, because people were not brought here as a result of the slave trade. People migrated, their parents migrated and made that choice. So it's a different, you know, connection. The people in America are completely removed, and by design. You know, a lot of them are, you know, completely ignorant or miseducated, and coupled with the fact that they don't travel. So very few of them had the experience of the international community. Fortunately for me, I began traveling when I was very young. So I began to see Europe, and I began to see the Caribbean. My mother's from Bermuda. And I got, you know, I had a different concept to offset what I was learning in the schools. So, yeah, I mean, definitely the American diaspora, fortunately, there's a lot of interest. You know? A lot of people are cultivating that interest, or were prior to this. You know, the year of return was a massive gateway for many people from the diaspora. Definitely. It was massive. So I'm seeing that dynamic change gradually. And I'm just hoping that we have a little bit more time to implement these things, because we've been slack in it. You know, we've been slack. This is something that we should have proactive. I'm a very proactive person. So I'm always ahead of the cusp. You know, I'm like, okay, let's start doing things now, not in a time of crisis, but let's do it when we have the liberty. Let's do it when we have the resources. Let's do it when we have more time and we're not under pressure. But right now, you know, everything's in the air.
The American experience is quite interesting to me, because when I went back recently for the year of return, I had a real emotional connection and experience with an American gentleman. So we were all at a party. Obviously, we were enjoying ourselves, having a couple of drinks or whatever. And he came up to me. I've never met him anywhere. I don't know who this dude is. And he was like just really emotional about the whole experience, being surrounded by so many Africans and black people. And he was like hugging me and was like, bro, this is the first time in my life where I haven't felt like a black person. Like, I didn't feel like a person of color. I just felt like a person. And it's a different experience for me, because I've always been going back and forth to Ghana. I grew up in an African community here in London. So I'm very in tune. I speak the language. I understand other people's languages as well to an extent. And to him, he was trying to explain it to me that the black experience in America is completely different to what we experience here in the UK. And for him to be in an environment where he doesn't have to be concerned or constantly noticing the skin tone or the color of his skin was an amazing feeling for him. It's something he's never had before.
Absolutely.
Because he just about just got his passport, and this is the first trip he's ever been on, which was to Ghana for the year of return. And it was amazing to hear that coming out of an American's mouth, because I kind of hear about it, I read about it in history books, but to feel the raw emotion of what that experience means to a black person who's been taken from their homeland and then completely stripped of their history and the knowledge of where they're from, and then experience it for the first time, it was breathtaking. So that to me kind of like opened my eyes at that. Yeah, we've kind of here in the UK, we're especially the black diaspora here in the UK, we have a different experience that is a bit of a privilege. Do you know what I mean? And something that we should harness and learn to.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've noticed that I've been able to, denote that living here for a few years, although I don't live in London. I live in Northampton, which is outside of London. Yeah. But, like I said, I think the people here have a much more direct connection to the motherland, and therefore they also have a voice in society here, because people understand that it's more or less, it's a voluntary thing for them to be here. In America, the whole connotation is, you're next to nothing. And basically you are the derivative of slaves. And, the non-Black Americans have that connotation towards you. As soon as they disagree with you or as soon as you offend them, it gets ugly really fast. And you can kind of tell that they just feel like, you are indentured to America. Whereas people here in Europe know, okay, you have a homeland, you go home, you can go home if you want to. You're here by choice, essentially. Yeah. But the Black Americans, because they're estranged from Africa, and they don't really also belong in America, there's just this whole sense of and lack of identity, and there's no sense of belonging. Even they are born and raised in that country, they don't feel American, Yeah. But then they're also very defensive. So if other people, as to include other Black Americans, will illuminate that fact, they're very, very defensive to the reality that they are not, have their own indigenous community or their sense of belonging. So it's a very, very complex thing, and it's unfortunate. And that's why I promote people that are kind of just fed up with that whole dynamic to begin to explore other options. I think that the diaspora as a whole has been very negligent as far as exploring potential options in the motherland. And again, I understand we're socialized to be that way, but at a certain point as an adult, you can make the conscious decision to say, you know what, look, I've tried really hard here. My parents have tried really hard here. My grandparents have tried really hard here. It's been tumultuous for them. It's been tumultuous for even ancestors I don't even know. I maybe should examine other options. And that's what ultimately led me to leave America. I was very unhappy. I had always been unhappy. And fortunately for me, because I knew via my traveling that I wasn't relegated to America, which most Americans don't have that feeling. Most Americans feel like this is it. I knew that the international community held more promise than what I was experiencing in America. So I took it, but the average person who has not traveled outside, has very limited exposure, doesn't really have means. A lot of Black Americans, unfortunately, are living in crazy situations. People outside of America don't know how they live, but a lot of them live in poverty, extreme poverty, that would mirror, poverty in third world countries. And so, the concept of them moving to another nation or something is very, very far-fetched, Yeah.
America is a strange place for me in general, because when you look at the stats, it's only 10% or less of the country that do even have their passports. So where does that derive from? Don't they apply for their passports, or do you just feel like the whole world can be found in America, so there's no point exploring elsewhere?
Well, I think now this may be controversial for your viewers. I don't know your viewing base, but obviously
I'm fine.
there's a lot of things at play. Three things mainly, three critical areas that work in conjunction. You have the religious area that really promotes people to be obedient and subservient and things like that, not really question, not really go out and explore. You have the media, which fearmongers the American people to the world. So basically, in the average American's mindset, America is the greatest country on earth.
Yeah, it's constantly pushed.
The things that they endure in their country are even worse in other countries. So, like, in terms of, like, one of the big areas I had an issue with in America was the gun violence. I absolutely hated the gun violence. I felt like I could be a victim at any time because there's a lot of shootings. A lot of Americans are armed. There's mass shootings, random.
There's more guns than there's people, aren't they? Yeah.
And so strategically, I chose to move to the UK, where I knew, guns for the civilians were not available. So me just being here, I feel more safer, even though some places like London, they have knife crime and things like that. The
demographic of who that happens to is very specific and minute. Group.
Yeah. I mean, the probability of me getting caught up in those things is still there, but it's much, much less than me being involved in something in America. However, the average American person thinks the rest of the world is more dangerous than America. Like, they don't realize they're living in the middle of a very dangerous place. So you have the media, deliberately promoting fear, and not really promoting the travel. And then you have the education, which the education actually just omits anything, versus I think probably European history, you get more of a worldview. Even probably your media and the BBC will give you more of a worldview. In America, like, for me, living in Ohio, I'm going to see Ohio news, I'm not even going to maybe not see, unless it's like a national, what do they call them? A natural disaster or, some kind of big crime case that's happening around the country. You're not getting exposed to what's happening nationwide, much less worldwide. So these people don't know about the world. They don't see anything positive about the world. And then also travel is very expensive. When I used to come to London, my tickets easily would be over $1,000 for a round trip just for me to do that. There's very little time at your job. At the time, I was working corporately for JP Morgan Chase. I had 2 weeks of vacation time for the entire year.
Oh, wow.
So, it doesn't really support frequent traveling. It deters frequent traveling and things like that. And Americans have this concept, well, I'm in the best place in the world. What do I need to see? What is there for me to see? So that is their mindset. Like I said, it's looked at as a luxury thing. People that travel often,
instead of education and growth.
Yeah. It's a luxury thing. It's not like, okay, you're going to Paris, you're going to London. That's big time. You know what I mean? So that in short, those are some of the factors that are at play. They're really not promoted. It's not feasible. It's very expensive. They're fearful of the world, etc.
Yeah, the reason why I brought that up is because to encourage people to travel in the first place, they need to have the basics in place. And one of the fundamental tools that you need to even leave the country is a passport. So I always wanted to know why such a small percentage of the American population has a passport and the majority don't. Because in order for you to step out of the box, you need to be able to step out of the box. So it's essential that the passport is there. And then you mentioned something as well about like they just stepping out and exploring. So there's something significant that travel done to me personally. So when I was younger, I had a group of friends from the age of like 18 onwards. We just started traveling the world. I mean, we started off locally around Europe, and then we headed to Asia, and we're just exploring the world. We left our neighborhood and just kind of spread our wings. And prior to traveling, I was kind of narrow-minded. I lived in a particular area in London where there was a fair bit amount of crime. There was quite a bit of poverty, not great poverty, but it was a bit of a rough area, as they'll call it. But and what tends to happen is when you live in those areas, you become narrow-minded, just as you were describing within your neighborhood. You become narrow-minded, you become quite stereotypical, and all you know is what you know within your neighborhood. But when you start traveling, you start getting exposed to other people, you start getting exposed to other cultures, you start realizing how you can potentially break boundaries and discover new things, discover new languages, discover new people, and you learn how to interact as well, which is the key element that I found helped me grow as an an individual. And after all those travels, initially I didn't realize what I was gaining from it. I just thought I was just having loads of fun experiences with friends and making new friends. But as I grew up, I realized I was becoming different from the people within my neighborhood.
Absolutely.
And me and my group of friends that were traveling, we were starting to behave differently. We started to look at the world differently. We started finding opportunities where others wouldn't look for opportunities. And tracing back to it now, I'm able to see that some of the skill sets that are developed, even something simple as becoming more tolerant of other races, other sexualities, just other various groups of people, all stem from my traveling and me being able to sort of merge with these individuals and create some sort of friendship and connection. Absolutely. So that's the essential part of traveling. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I mean, the exposure is a priceless element. And obviously the people that, I'm like anti-American, anti-government, like, I think you guys are just wicked in short. But obviously the people that are kind of perpetuating these things that keep people, put parameters on their lives, obviously they're well-traveled, they're well-educated, they have the exposure. Especially in America, the American government knows that if, for instance, the Black people begin to get this exposure, that will spark and cultivate the interest for them to go out more or potentially leave. And they can't, that is something that they do not want to do. If you look at Black Americans, they're at the heart of some of the largest industries in America. They're at the center of the sports industry. They're at the center of music. They're at the center of fashion, culture, entertainment. They cannot afford, and they're also at the center of the working class. So they cannot afford for these people to decide they no longer want to be in that environment and or take their resources elsewhere. So it's much more profitable for them to have these people not have the interest. We don't have physical boundaries on us that prohibit us, or, we haven't had in the past. Physical boundaries that prohibit us from traveling, from starting businesses, from expanding our lives and things like that. But the boundaries have been mental and psychological.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
Basically, you restrict yourself. You have, and this is the game they play, because they said, well, you know what? You can travel. You can do whatever you want to do. You can live wherever you want. You can, do these things. However, there's all these psychological restrictions that we've set on ourselves that prohibit us from going. I'm the kind of person that, because of my distrust of the government, because of my distrust of religion and education, I have decided to explore those things for myself, to come to the conclusion of what it is. So I know for a fact, you have loads of non-Black, people, Asians, and so on and so forth visiting the continent. However, the Black Americans' perspective is, okay, there's disease there. I'm not wanted there. What am I going to do in Africa? What is there to see? They've only seen, poor areas portrayed on the media. They've seen starving children. They haven't seen Zanzibar. They haven't seen the West Coast. They haven't seen the waterfalls or, anything that is enticing, as a tourist attraction. So, but I knew, okay, you know what? These non-Black people frequently go to the motherland.
Yeah, especially if you look at some of the powerhouses.
And they're not afraid. Even here in the UK, the Prince Harry and Prince, they're always going down to the motherland and got their charities and all this stuff. So I'm thinking, like, this is not adding up. So I was always motivated by, whatever they're doing, I'm going to go and do that myself. I'm not going to be here in this fishbowl while they're out seeing the world and enjoying themselves. No. So that was kind of, I had a myriad of reasons that led me to, the lifestyle I've chosen to live. But yeah, I mean, unfortunately, a lot of people just don't see, there's just so much deception and misinformation. Because, I mean, obviously, the continent, just like other foreign countries that have benefited, you have like Dubai. You have Asia, a lot of the diasporas that have chosen India. You have these people, they go abroad, they school, they study, they create businesses. They funnel their money back home. They build up their country and make it a beautiful place, a luxurious place. So obviously, if the Black Americans create that connection with the motherland, the West is in big trouble, because these people have access to, the currency, the education, the skill set, blah blah blah. And they're instead of cementing it in that Western location, they're actually funneling it back home. Well, that's going to develop Africa. That's going to build it up. You know, you as a Ghanaian also know, as you've been going back for the past couple of decades, you've seen, you know, Accra change. You know, you've seen.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, every couple of years it changes.
Seen it get developed, and it's not necessarily getting developed through the government. It's getting developed through the diaspora, sending the money home, building projects, buying land, et cetera, et cetera. So that connection is extremely important, and that is what has been, you know, deliberately severed from these. You know, we see historically we had Black leaders in America promoting the Black Americans to go back to the motherland. You know, Marcus Garvey, Frederick Douglass, Malcolm X. You know, these people were like, hey, look, we need to create that connection. And then those people were all snuffed out because I mean, at the end of the day, Black Americans are unwanted there. You know, they're treated, they are inflicted with extreme racism, discrimination, police brutality, inequality in pay. The list goes on and on. So really, if they didn't want us there, then the channels for us to get out would be available, right? But they don't want us there, but they also don't want us to leave, you know? So it's one of those
I think it makes economic sense.
Yeah, very complex.
Yeah. I was one of those individuals who were mentally trapped for quite a bit of a period during my younger days, because when I was younger, I kind of got forced back to go to Ghana. It's like, oh, I don't want to go back there. What am I going to do there? Like, I'm just going to hang around in a compound and just be bored and just be hanging around with the grandmothers and not really explore, because I don't want to explore and I don't really understand Africa. And the first time my eyes really got open, I think I was about 18, and I went back to Ghana, and that's when I was old enough to kind of like step out of the family home.
Tap in, yeah.
I was able to tap in and just like head out on the streets and just talk to some of the locals, and I felt this weird, it's hard to explain, but it's some sort of like spiritual sense of joy that you get when you're around the locals and you're really starting to tap in and connect.
It's home.
It's home. That's the only way you can describe it. And it took me a while to get in. That's when I started understanding like the psychological trappings of being in the West and not knowing what's possible back home. So that's really vital to be able to then tap in and go there. But there was an interesting conversation I had with a historian, actually. He was a Black historian, and he was telling me about so this comes back to the whole issue of the diaspora going back, because I think there'll be a bit of an issue if everyone was to pack their bags up and say, okay, we're heading back to Africa. I think that's going to be chaos. So I think prior to that being done, there needs to be a level of, well, I don't think that's ever going to be done, and I'm not sure.
I doubt it because I think actually the channels that have created this disconnect have been extremely effective.
Yeah,
there are a lot of Black people that you know, they actually adamantly don't want any affiliation with the motherland.
Yeah,
so I think even those of us that are venturing on and having our interest in the motherland right now, we are a minority of a minority, you know, like, so I don't actually foresee, I mean, maybe perhaps because of what's happening right now. I think some people that have had it kind of in their mentality, like, okay, eventually I'm going to go home. Eventually I'm going to set up shop. Some of those people may be motivated to expedite those plans because they were like, shoot, I'm here and I'm stuck. You know, that's how I feel. I'm like, I literally just got back from Kenya when all this stuff exploded. And I was just like, damn, if I had to be stranded anywhere, I wouldn't want to be here. Yeah. So I think for some people, this will be a wake up call and help get their game plan expedited. For other people, it may spark. They may realize, like, you know what, damn, I need to really kind of cement a backup plan or what my future is going to look like. But I really doubt, you know, just because, I mean, you know how there's just so much. I can't really speak to the effect of what goes on here in the UK because from my own analysis, the communities seem a bit more cohesive. But in America, the Black community is like virtually non-existent. I mean, there's just so much strife between just members of the same community. So I can't even really see this mass migration from America.
Yeah, and I think that's where the problem comes from, because if there was a mass migration, is how would they be able to sort of like collaborative work together back home?
Yeah,
because that's going to be another major issue as well. And so what going back to what I was talking about with what I was exploring with the historian, is the question that he put forward to me, or the idea was that if everyone in the diaspora was to head home today, what you're going to find is there's going to be an enslavement of the indigenous people, because without a common purpose and without a common ideal of why we're going back and what we're going to build and to do, there's just going to be utter chaos, because it's going to be fragmented ideas. And that's the problem, because I mean, if you look through history, we've always had like a leader. We've always had one person who's kind of like driven or led the forces, whether it be Garvey, whether it be Nkrumah, whatever. But now it seems to be so many various fragmented ideologies and leaders, and that's the problem. So is one, what is our manifesto? Do you see what I mean?
First of all, you're correct. There's no geographical cure. So essentially, if you have a poor mindset and you just pick up and move to a different location, you carry that along with
you.
Yeah. So definitely there needs to be, I definitely promote a Pan-African mentality. So my mentality as far as going to the motherland.
So can you describe Pan-African for those that possibly might not understand what it means?
Just to break it down, Pan means four. Okay. And Africa is African. So basically bringing together and having that collective, and more or less in regards to those that are a part of the diaspora, them returning or, at least turning their sights or interests or being made aware of the motherland. That's what Pan-African means. So basically what that means is, if you are to go to African nations, it's not for you to kind of have like your separate communities. It would be wise for you to kind of integrate with the people and create that bridge and create that relationship, because the reality is you, as someone coming from outside, there's a lot of things you don't know. There's a lot of things you're disconnected from. You don't know the cultural norms. You may not know the language. You may not know the food or how to prepare the food. You don't know the demographics. You don't know your way around. You don't know all these things. And so if you come in with that Western mentality of, okay, our way is superior, we're going to do this and that and this and that, and organize, whereas you do have a wealth of information that can be applied. In order for you to figure out how it can be applied well and beneficial, you need to establish that relationship with the local people. And I think those of us coming from outside, a lot of us, one of the common things that we miss, and one of the common things that we have lacked growing up in these environments, is the cohesive community. So that behooves us to become or integrate with the pre-existing community that's already available there. So I think obviously that has to be established. Okay, when we come, we're not coming to take over this place. There's already people living there. They already have an understanding of their homeland, how it operates, and this and that. We can enhance it on certain levels. We can create awareness in certain areas where there may not be awareness. But I think it definitely has to be a collaborative team effort kind of thing. You know what I mean? Because otherwise, like you said, it'll be separate communities, and that doesn't really achieve the overall goal. So I promote people to, and that's been one of my strongest suits, like I said, as someone from not really connected to the continent, as someone who's now very connected. I tapped into various communities where I went, and those people, what they can provide you, the insight to life there is priceless.
Most definitely.
It supersedes books or what you've Googled or what you've watched on YouTube. You can have an intimate understanding of life there through someone who is from there. So I think that is where the value is,
Yeah, most definitely. Because and I think also before you take the leap or whatever and wanting to help improve Africa, you always need to identify what your skill sets are as well, and how you can implement your skill sets within the system that's already there. So one of the things that I'm constantly looking at within Africa is infrastructure and education.
Yes.
Because I think number one, for a nation to improve overall, you need to educate your people. You need to educate your women and your men exactly the same. Because at the moment, when you look at the GDP of most African countries, it's like 70-30%. So men are contributing way more. And the thing is, it's always proven that if you're able to get like an equal input into the GDP, improves the overall the overall life quality of the people within a particular country. And then infrastructure is essential.
Yeah,
people need to be able to move around. People need to be able to get the basic essentials, water.
I mean, as the population grow, you know, just being able to, for the infrastructure, being able to expand to handle the larger populations and things like that.
Most definitely, yeah.
Absolutely, I agree. And I mean, I think when it comes to education, we should reform the education. We should create curriculums that educate our people about our people.
Oh yeah, definitely, yeah.
Their history, you know, because I think this has always been a confusion of those in the diaspora too, which they look to the continent as, okay, why do you entertain these Europeans? You know, when they come, you treat them so special, you still allow them to come and use your resources. You know, why is this? But in the reality, the education an American, a British is getting is still similar to what a native African person is getting. You know, we have these former colonial masters creating the curriculums for our schools and saying what's appropriate and what they need to learn and what they don't. You know, you have people growing up on the continent that don't even know about the slave trade. You know, they don't even get any African American history or anything like that. So obviously, I think we need to promote our people to be to have a self-reliance, to have a self-pride, to be innovative to the problems that are facing our countries. You know, if we groom our children, that they can perhaps hold the solution to some of the problems that we're experiencing, and challenge them to come up with that. You know, children are very bright, very imaginative. Some of the things that we are experiencing in our countries, if we say, hey, look, you know, let's take your ideas. What do you think about this problem facing the electrical grid? What do you think about this problem facing the water supply? What do you think about this problem, you know, and let the children have that free reign. We don't really empower our children in leadership positions. You know, we groom them to migrate and go to the West. So that's what they do. So if we
the pastures, isn't it, the whole idea?
Yeah. You know what I mean? We need to start with education, the same way the West does. You know, they're pushing their agendas. They're pushing their homosexuality. They're pushing their transgender and all this diversity. They target our children. They know that, okay, if we get this instilled in the next generation, they'll grow up as adults and they'll function on their own. You know, you need to say, okay, you know what, we want our kids to be. Kwame Nkrumah, he was big on education, you know, established the Pan-African schooling because he knew, okay, let's implement this mindset in our kids and they'll grow up to be strong Pan-Africans. They'll grow up to be strong advocates of their own nations and things like that. And that is where we need to start. You know,
most definitely. And I think that there's something quite important, which I noticed as well by observing is the utilization of the most productive people within a society, because that's such a key function. And I actually know, when it came to Africa, I had a disturbing. Well, I have many conversations at the moment, but I was speaking to a businessman. He's a self-proclaimed capitalist, so he's all about business, and he set up a fintech company in Africa. So it was all about moving money around and finding easier ways of getting money around, like how we've got mobile money and stuff like that happening now. And all his employees were African. He wasn't African himself. He's from Eastern Europe. And so I asked him a question. I was like, well, were there already people there with the skill sets that you required? And he was like, yeah, all you have to do in any society is to just filter through and find the most productive people within that society, find the smartest, the brightest, and then give them the tools required for them to harness their greatness. And that's what he done. So he went to Africa and people were like, oh, you're not going to find people good enough to be able to develop so-and-so over there because they don't have the level of IQ and so forth. And he was like, no, IQ is actually fairly evenly shared out across the globe, but you just have to harness it. And that's all it is. So he went to Nigeria, Ghana, and I think Kenya, and he specifically went to each university, picking out the brightest of minds and put them into a hub and gave them all the tools they needed. And they were able to create all of these fantastic apps, came up with all of these ideas. And that's something that our leaders are not really doing, or we're not doing as a nation, which is dangerous, because in order for a nation to progress, you do need to utilize those, because not all of us have the same level of IQ. Not all of us have the same level of innovation or drive, but you got to find these people in order for them to create opportunities for others to then continuously thrive on. So that's my piece that I'll give in relations to like education and how that's going to improve Africa as a whole.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it can be done. I think it can be done, especially in this modern day. We have tools and technology that can assist us. And I mean, again, I do put a lot of the weight on those of us that are a part of the diaspora to begin to make that connection, because I've seen nothing but receptiveness from the people that I've interacted with. I went to Kenya, and I have a website, which is www.TheAfrikansuperstarofficial.com. I sell like luxury jewelry and clothing and items made from Kenya and Ghana.
Oh, cool.
So I actually went to Kenya and kind of set up this connection with a bead maker out there. I met a young gentleman who was my Uber driver, and I kind of said, hey, do you know some Maasai people that can make some beads for me, like for a custom project? He said, oh, yeah, I can find somebody for you. So he's now my project manager.
Uber drivers are the plugs, by the way, in Africa. For those wanting to find out, as soon as you land, speak to your Uber driver and you're sorted.
Get your Uber driver. I'm telling you, you can get you a tour guide, a place to stay, everything. Translate Swahili, everything. Yeah. So I spoke to my Uber driver. Shout outs to Joseph. Yeah. And he, connected me with this bead maker. And I mean, she's like the real deal. Speaks Swahili, so we're trying to do this project, and he's translating for me. And it's beautiful. But, getting business started on the continent is so much easier than doing it here. Like literally, I got on the ground and just started to implement the plan. And so I think if more of us made the effort, I think we would be happy with our efforts, and wherever you are functioning, because the reality is, if you're a nurse here in the UK, we need nurses back home. If you're a teacher here, we need teachers back home. If you're a lawyer or a professional IT, we need everything that the West needs. Our homeland needs it too, and whereby here you're going to be groomed to be an employee. I don't care if you have your PhD, you're going to the university looking for a job. Yeah. You're going to the hospital looking for a job. You know what I mean? Back home, you can have your own clinic. You can go from being a teacher to the headmaster.
Home. Just like that. Yeah.
You know what I mean? You can go from being a hairdresser in a salon to being the madam of the salon, your own salon back home. So there's just a lot more opportunity for expansion if you have that vision. And I think, honestly, most of the people that will be attracted to the continent are those with vision. It's not a place for the person who needs everything allotted to them to go. It's for the go-getter. It's for the pioneer, because we are the generation. We have a unique subset that allows us to really pioneer and create this bridge. And that's something previous generations have not had. So we are pioneering. So that means it comes with challenges, it comes with the unknown, and blah, blah, blah. We need people that have the heart and that are brave to go out there and say, you know what, I'm going to cement this connection for those that are coming behind me. Once we do the hard work, they'll be able to benefit from it. Just like we're able to be the recipients of certain things because of the people that went before us. Yeah. So I would not advise people that don't have that mentality to persist on to the motherland, because it's not for the faint at heart. You have to have vision. When you get there, things will manifest in your mind and you can go with that direction. In my opinion, there's just a lot less friction. I am an imaginative, creative person, so I can see things, but whereas I feel like in the West, there's so many roadblocks to my progress. In Africa, if you have some resources or you get the connections, you just go straight forward, you have money. Okay. Yeah. So what? You might bribe a little, you might do whatever, you're able to get your plan rolling, and that's what is important. Yeah. So that's obviously, I think it's for the imaginative.
Definitely. And I think it's also a sacrificial move as well, because for those wanting instant gratification, you're not going to get that if you're going to be a part of such a movement, because you're going there for the greater good. So expecting to blow up and
it can be a gradual thing,
Yes, it's definitely a gradual move.
And be, whereas I think here, the span of our lifetime is more median. What I mean? You live an average life for your whole life, right? you work this job.
Yeah, you get enough food.
Hand to mouth. You don't go up, but you don't go down. You just stay in the median. Mm-hmm. In Africa, you have the potential to be great. Yeah. But instead of, you having that consistent median, it may be filled with ups and downs, whatever, to get to that peak. So it's just for the person to determine, okay, you know what, I'd rather have the safe bet. If you're a stock person, I'd rather invest in mutual. You know what I mean? I don't want to do startups. I don't want to do these, trending stocks. Mm. But that risk taker is like, you know what? This thing is going to blow. Next year, the person who invested in Bitcoin before it blew up, they became a millionaire. The person who invested in mutual stocks is getting that $2 dividend. You know what I mean? It's just different.
Yeah, definitely.
So, it's just different. So for me, I bet on the motherland. I think because I do come from the diaspora, that does also garner me preferential treatment in certain instances. And so you can capitalize on the things that are helpful to you. Whereas in America, like, okay, you here as a British Ghanaian, there's loads of British Ghanaians.
Yeah.
You don't really stand out. But when you go home, you go to the motherland, people are going to be like, oh, so you're from abroad. It works to your advantage. So it's for us to capitalize things that are ordinary about us here that wouldn't necessarily get us a leg up. That gives us an edge back home. It's the same thing other, migrants do. These Chinese people, these Indians, they're nothing in their country. Nobody cares about them. They come to England and it's like, wow, you're so smart. Wow, you're so rich. Wow, you must be, the connotation. And that gets them preferential treatment and they capitalize off of it. So I think we can use those same things not to be, predatory on our homeland, but just
that's key.
Not you don't go there with okay, I'm about to take advantage of these people and I'm gonna hustle these people
and I'm better than them, because you're gonna definitely, that's gonna hit you, that's gonna come back and bite you.
That's not the way forward. We need to start taking a selfless look at some things and say, okay, you know what, look, let's be prepared to sacrifice so that we can get our things established. I think one thing I hate about being outside is I absolutely hate being referred to as a minority. And I hate being treated like that, especially when I know that I'm not. But I realize that a lot of people are lured from their homelands because of lack of opportunity. This and that. So maybe they don't want to come abroad. How many of us Africans like cold weather? You know what I'm saying? We like never seeing the sun. We like a lack of social events. We like, all these things that we go through, all these complexities we go through in the West. We don't like it, but people come because of the opportunity. If we're able to create more opportunity back home, that's some young person that's not going to have to leave, that doesn't want to leave. You know what I mean? They'll have opportunities afforded to them there, so they don't have to go. And that's just so powerful. So for me, I've lived, I'm in my mid-30s now. I've lived a good portion out here. And I'm just like, I'm so sick of a lot of things that I've had to go through in these environments. If I can set the stage for somebody to not have to, not be racially profiled, not worry about police brutality, not worry about being the best and brightest, but getting passed over for promotions and, these kind of things that a lot of Black professionals deal with in these environments, then I'm willing to do that. I'm willing to do that for the next generation or potentially even my kids. We have to think about our children eventually, What's the world going to be like for them? Do we want them to go through the things we've had to go through? If our child faces it and say, Mom and Dad, why did you bring me here? Why didn't you let me live in Ghana? Why didn't you let me live in Nigeria? I enjoy it more there. We're going to have to answer the hard questions. Well, son, I was a wimp. I didn't want to do the sacrifice.
Especially, I think those questions are probably going to be asked more now because the change is so rapid, and they're going to start seeing the greatness which is happening in Africa. Because so the word that you brought up, which is very interesting, is opportunity. So sometimes people fear that there's lack of opportunity in Africa in order to tap in and get stuff done. But when you look at it, the opportunity for development and growth is immense. I mean, I was listening to a talk from one of the biggest developers in Ghana, and he said that in terms of just property development alone, there's 300 years worth of property development if you was to compare the West with certain places in Africa. So that alone is, if you're someone who's of entrepreneurial mind, that's 300 years worth of business there that you can potentially do. Right. So you can't tell me there's no opportunity. Do you know what I mean? There's vast amount of opportunity.
I mean, and even just like the basic things, like here, you know, even if you just model yourself after someone, you know, you see a business here that might be popular back home. You've recently been there. So you see like one of the things that's on the rise is like dessert shops.
Yeah.
We see loads of dessert shops here. Dessert shops are a big deal there. You know, the people go to Accra Mall on the weekends just to go to the dessert shop.
Yeah.
You know, Western style pizza shop. Western style anything.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Uber,
even if you
Uber
have a thrift store from clothes that you've gotten from the UK or America. You know what I mean? You can, I mean, there's just, and like I said, just the availability of the growth. You know, whereby here you can be stagnant for like 10 years. If you invest that same 10 years of productivity in the motherland, I mean, you probably know people like I do. I got friends that are like,
yeah, definitely. Yeah,
there's a friend of mine from university. I went to the University of Cincinnati in Columbus, Ohio. So there's a friend of mine that graduated 2005. All right. He left Ohio and went back to Kumasi. All right. His dad had a company. He went in and worked with his dad. This dude's got a freaking mega mansion now. He got a brand new Audi.
And that's a combination of knowledge. That's what that is. Do you know what I mean?
The same 10 years, I ain't got nothing to show for it. This guy's got a mansion, a business, and a brand new sports car. Okay. Yeah. Plus a beautiful family. You know, father of 3 children, married. You know what I'm saying? So I'm like, if you can take that 10 years, if you're willing to invest like 5-10 years and you're serious about your grind, the rate of growth is amazing, you know, and all it really takes. And then often I interviewed a guy on my channel named Anthony Jamefe, right? He is the CEO of a watch company that is distributing watches, you know, manufacturing and distributing watches from Ghana. He's the only watchmaker from Africa. Wow. First and only. So he was working for Timepiece GH, which is a popular watch company, you know, in Ghana. And he noticed that all the watches that they were selling were all imports, that there was not one that was made in Africa. So he started his company December of 2018. Started his company, and it's amazing. He's had exponential growth. So I actually met with him on my recent stay in February, and we did an interview, and he kind of told me the story of how everything came about. And so when you think about that, like if you wanted to, for instance, start a watch company here in the UK or in France, you know, you're going to have so many competitors. You know? This guy he's historic. He's the first, and right now he's the only.
Wow, that's amazing.
It's amazing, and he's I think he's, you know, in his early 30s. His watch company is called Caveman. The watches, the website is cavemanwatches.com.
I'm definitely gonna check that out. Yeah.
Yeah, the watches are beautiful, you know, and this man, everything's handmade. I mean, he has expertise. It's fantastic. But my point is market dominance. You know, if you are a business, you don't even have competition. You come to the field, you're the only one. Yeah. So the same way that we have to deal with certain ethnic groups and stuff like that because they run a monopoly. I'm a black lady, so you know, you get your hair, you get your nails done. A lot of the beauty and hair care, it's all run by Asians, right? Yeah. We don't really want to deal with them. I'm Pan-African. I'm pro-black. I'd rather go support a black hair shop. But if there's none, guess what? I got to go.
And if there is one, you know that the products were manufactured nowhere near Africa as well. So that's another issue. I think manufacturing is probably one of the things that we need to look at because there's so much scope and opportunity for growth out there. Especially we can replicate China. It's very much proven that Africa can replicate China because we're growing at a ridiculous rate at the moment. It's predicted that within the next 30 years, we're probably going to double in population, hit like 2.5 billion. And that's opportunity. That's scope. So there's no excuse.
We can, like I said, you can model yourself after someone. You don't have to come up with some kind of ethereal idea of, okay, what kind of business could I do? What kind of service could I do? It's as simple as maybe you go there and you notice that there's not a service that you use in the West. maybe there's no dry cleaner in your whole neighborhood, or there's no coffee shops around, or there's nobody who, there's no hair salon or whatever, or no clinics. We have a lot of medical professionals here. These kind of things. And you realize, well, there's nobody here. That right there could potentially be the avenue that you segue. I noticed when like how I came about with my company was every time I go to the motherland, I would buy goods. I love kente and stuff like that. I love ankara. I would buy, traditional dresses or jewelry and stuff like that. So whenever I would come back, people would say, well, where did you get this? And I'd be like, oh, I got this from Ghana, or I got this from Kenya. And that would kind of be the end of the conversation. And I realized that here in the West, we do everything online. We do everything via our technology. In Africa, it's more word of mouth. You're going to communicate with people and say, hey, where should I go for this? Where do you know a good person? Blah, blah, blah. So what I did was I said, you know what? Let me create a website where I source from the motherland and I sell to the diaspora. You know what I mean? Because people in the motherland, they're not necessarily going to buy my prints or buy my jewelry because it's easily accessible for them.
Yeah.
But here in the diaspora, they don't have access to those things. So I can actually create a luxury line. And so that's what I did. So I built my website myself. I got the goods from Kenya and Ghana. I have custom makers that design, make special designs for my web page. And that's what I did. But again,
ship over for you.
Yeah, that came from me actually going to the motherland. Me just being me, liking to dress up or liking, special or unique items, wearing my things. Well, where did you get that? Now, when I have that conversation with somebody, they're like, man, I love that necklace. I'm like, hey, you can go to TheAfrikansuperstar.com. They got, similar items. They have this and that. And then I also have a special market because I have limited edition. So if you like things that are special, this item, there might be one or two of them, period. You know what I'm saying? So that drives up the demand for it because it's like, it's not like it's mass produced, it's something that's unique and special and this and that. So, that's where my idea came from. But again, it once you go to the motherland, a lot of things will spark in your mind. And it may be relative to your area of expertise. You may see, wow, they could really use some city planning. They could really use this. They could really use that. And then insert yourself in there.
Yeah. So we're given some great pointers in regards to like going back and opportunities that are available and the benefits of going back for the diaspora. But one of the things that we'll probably have to deal with, and I think the diaspora needs to be made aware of and educated on, is also how do we deal with like honest leadership? Because it's fair enough looking at things from a person-to-person perspective, like going back and doing something for yourself. But as a system as well, we need to look at our leadership structures and how to find more honest and we'll try to find more leaders with integrity, because corruption's always been the case, especially when you're dealing with people in poverty, because everyone's kind of like scrambling to the top. As you find here in the West as well and everywhere in the world, but particularly Africa, it has a greater effect because the majority of the people don't have a lot. So how do you encourage more the diaspora going back to have a more positive influence into the leadership of the various countries?
Well, I mean, if they have those interests, like as far as maybe political interests, they could once again insert themselves there. I don't really particularly, my particular scale is, not the grand scale. So I don't really look at like remodeling the entire continent.
I think that's remodeling. You get yourself into trouble when you're doing that.
Because I mean, in reality, we have to be realistic and we understand that a lot of these problems are at play. But if we're honest, I mean, I grew up in America for decades. I never had any say-so of who was leading the country. I never voted for any of the presidents or the state representatives. I wasn't interested in voting. I focused on what I could do as an individual to enhance the quality of my life. I would say if you have political aspirations, or you're in the legal system, or you're in some kind of realm where you would have influence to those levels, then definitely insert yourself there, because we need more poignant leaders. I mean, we can look at what the difference of what, I think Nana Addo, he's opened up the economy more in Ghana. There's been the Year of Return campaign. We can attribute that to him. Some projects that are going on, some growth and stuff like that. So if we have, but again, you look at Nana Addo, what he had exposure to the UK. You know, he schooled here, and also, you know, Kwame Nkrumah schooled abroad as well. So you look at some of those people that have had international exposure and what they're able to accomplish when they come back and insert that. As far as people that are venturing to the continent, and you definitely need to connect with trustworthy individuals. I wouldn't recommend you finding just anyone and choosing to invest and choosing to start business with them until you can kind of verify who that individual is. So a rule of thumb for me is I'm already integrated into these communities that I do business, like in Kenya and Ghana, for instance. So I consult my friends. And if you want to buy land, I talk to someone that has actually bought land from someone or done business multiple occasions with someone to verify that that person is a legitimate source. Or maybe even if you connect with other expats, you know, that are now doing business there. Because obviously we come from outside, we have a different standard or a different view of how we want things done or visions of how we want things implemented. People that come from the West, sometimes they can relate more to us. You know, I know there's another very popular YouTuber. Her name is The Only Way is Ghana. And she actually used to live here in the UK, and she migrated back to Ghana. And so online, she's been chronicling a building project. So she's been showing people step by step, you know, as she laid the foundation, she buys the products, what she goes through with the people. And she has a lot of great suggestions of people to work with in Ghana, her contractor and all that stuff. So a lot of it has to do with reference, you know. Research, you know, tapping into the community is key. And then a lot of times you'll be able to get around some of those things. You know, so I think it's possible. You know, we look at Rwanda, for instance. We look at how Paul Kagame is transforming Rwanda. We look at, you know, unfortunately, the fall of Gaddafi, but we look at how Libya used to be in a great position because of the leadership that actually cared and provided for the people. So it's possible. I don't have political aspirations.
Yeah.
So I don't really, you know.
I know it's a big one. That's the thing.
It's a big one. I mean, leadership is important, but I think sometimes it's a cop out too, because sometimes, and I mean honestly, if you play your cards right, you can get around that stuff in Africa. Unfortunately, you know, you can. If you know people, if you got money, you know, you can get your project done. Versus here, sometimes, you know, you wouldn't be able to get it done in the same way. I don't really particularly feel contrary to those things. I know they exist, and so therefore, if I want to do business there, okay, you know,
I think it helps the economy move there. It's become a part of the economic world.
Human nature. It's human nature, even at the most basic levels, even in a tribal setting. Let's say, you know, one chief says, "Hey, you scratch my back, I scratch yours. Okay, well, you trade this with me, I'll give you my daughter." You know what I mean? Whatever. This is the nature of trade and bartering and everything. And we would be doing ourselves a disservice to act like that stuff doesn't go on here. You know, that stuff goes on here, but Black people a lot of times can't even get into those echelons because it's the white boys up there at the top, you know, running and controlling everything. They're scratching each other's back. They're in bed with each other. They're doing favors. At least in Africa, we can get it. we can get to those levels. You know what I'm saying? Like, so I don't particularly feel, you know, that those are negative things. I think that those are things that can be utilized. At least, you know, okay, look, I'm going to have to bribe these people. Okay, that's just a fact. But I plan for that, and then you know, I move forward with my project, and you know, those people aren't going to live forever. There will come a time when we are those senior people, you know. So if you know, the circle of life will take its course, and eventually those people will be expunged, and we'll have the new generation coming up. So we can position ourselves well by whatever means, you know. I mean, don't go stealing from people, don't go killing people, don't do anything unscrupulous, you know, per se. You know, position yourself well, and then you can have influence. You know, that's also another way.
That's why it's so important in regards to like the position that we take now, because how we behave now will possibly going to continue when we're in a position of power. So we got to make sure that we at least operate with a certain level of integrity, and also it should be the people focused instead of like an individualistic point of view. It's like I'm not coming here to take for me and my family alone. Do you know what I mean? There's a bigger.
Yeah, I mean, spread the wealth. I mean, like definitely. You said, the reality is, look, you scratch my back, I scratch yours. I understand. It's the same way. Look, we're YouTubers. We're public figures, media people. It's the same thing. You come on my platform, I come on yours. We share the wealth. It's great. We both eat. Definitely, if you're getting favors or whatever, that's cool. But keep your people in mind. Make sure you're doing something productive. Don't just hoard it all for yourself. You know what I mean? Like share it a little bit.
And there's a quote which one of my mentors once told me. He was like, the wealth and the health of your people will determine your wealth and your health.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because
so if you're able to keep your people healthy and wealthy, then in return you be healthy and wealthy, because you're not going to be poor if your people are poor. So you should be able to find systems to encourage growth within your people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, that's something like, for instance, I with my business, I make sure the people I do business with are taken care of. You know what I mean? A pound goes a long way back in the motherland.
Oh yeah, definitely.
You know what I mean? So there's ways for you to actually, take care of them, but it's not going to break your bottom dollar if you're doing, transatlantic business or whatever like that. And the reality is, there was something that DeVito said, Nigerian music star DeVito. He said, every person around me is well taken care of. So these people are very loyal to me, referring to his bodyguards, his gate guys, and all these people. He doesn't, eat off the plate all he wants and then have these people living in poverty, because that creates jealousy and that creates people wanting to take you down and want to rob from you and things like that. But when you take care of these people, they will have a love and affinity towards you, because they'll be like, wow, you took care of me. So it wouldn't be easy for them to turn their back on you for maybe a one-time event when they know, okay, what, this person has consistently been looking after me for time or whatever. So, when you're starting your business, there's a way for both of you guys to capitalize, and I think if we keep that mentality, because the Western mentality is I eat everything, no matter if I'm fat and huge, I take it all, and you guys get a little bit, but if you distribute that, where it's like, okay, obviously I'm the owner and the person running this business, but we distribute it more. So you're also living a good quality life. You're going to be loyal to me. You're going to give me a good quality product. You're going to be on time. You're going to do what you're supposed to do, and all those kind of things.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I like the picture that we've painted of Africa here, because what a lot of people tend to do is they have this fear of Africa, and we're showing them that both of us have enjoyed Africa in various forms. And look, we speak so highly of Africa. I mean, right now I'm itching to go back. Yeah, definitely.
I live beneath my means here in the UK. Let me say that. Yeah. I'm on a high pedestal in the motherland. So.
Oh yeah, 100%. And it feels better as well, because the thing is, I mean, I'm one of those people. Like I've lived in various countries throughout my life, and I grew up in various countries, and then I'm also very appreciative and very grateful for every single opportunity I've had along the way. I'm grateful for all the experiences I've had, but at the same time, I'm also very aware of the feeling I have when I'm back home. Very aware, and it's been undefeated, and it doesn't come close to it. So it does say a lot about what's going on, whether it's physical or spiritual or something deeper. So,
yeah, I mean, and there's just a level of respect that we don't get in the West, that we get back home. You know what I mean? Yeah. Period. I mean, I know definitely you as a man can attest, being a black man, being restricted all the time in these settings, or having those negative connotations versus when you go home, you're like the chief ogre, everybody, not just brothers, but ladies, kids, everybody, and it's the same for women. We get, I like to say we get pampered, the men are very respectful, and everybody people look at you as a family member.
Yeah.
Everybody sees you. The children you don't know are going to call you auntie and uncle.
Yeah.
The seniors that you don't know are going to give you a smile. The ladies you don't know will be polite, and all these things. And it's that familial view. Like, okay, you're a part of the community. You're not just like some alien. versus like here, we don't see each other necessarily as brothers and sisters. So if we see another person in harm, or, you know, we see a domestic dispute, you know, people don't want to intervene because they're like, well, I don't know those people. I don't want to get involved.
Yeah, everyone's detached from each other.
Yeah, I mean, at home, like, if somebody disrespects you, everybody going to jump.
Yeah, you know what's so funny? So I was, so I think I was driving around and I had like my grandmother and one of my aunties in the car, and she was telling us a story about how her car got stuck in the gutter, and within like 2 seconds, the local boys had like lifted her car up and like shoved it back on the road. And she was like, yeah, that's one thing about like Ghana and Africa in general, is that whenever you're in trouble, everyone within the local vicinity feels like it's their trouble. It's a communal thing. Yeah, it's not an individualistic thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, they might ask you for some money to buy a drink after. They'll be like, oh, auntie, can I get some money for some Supermall? But again, nonetheless, they're going to help you before they ask you. Yeah,
it's life, you know what I mean? It's like, I don't know, people, but I guess in our world here, the way we live here, that's like taboo, you know. But back home, it's like, it makes sense. Like, okay, you know what? Look, they know we're from abroad. They look at us as rich guys, rich women, big girl, auntie, senior sister, you know, all these titles. So they look at us like that. You know, they look at us as big people.
Yeah.
And so, you know, hey, look, you got a couple CDs for me. I know you got a couple. I just helped you out. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And don't feel away about giving it as well. That's what I encourage people to do, because it's all a part of stimulating the economy. So whenever I jump out of an Uber, I never collect my change. Whenever I'm buying, I stop over and I buy my plantain and peanuts from the local lady. I always give her a bit of extra, or just drive off without asking for the change and stuff like that. It's all a part of me stimulating the economy with the additional that I have here. Do you know what I mean? Or the little extra that I have. So yeah,
it makes you feel good too.
Definitely.
You know what I mean? Like,
definitely.
It makes their whole day better. You know.
Yeah.
And you know, it's nice. I think it's nice, and I think if more of us in the diaspora took that position, you know, we would have that elevated image in the eyes of our peers, you know, whereas some of these foreigners, that's why they look at them the way they do, because they come here and they're generous, you know, they're doing the tourist stuff, they're spending money. If they saw us doing that, they could have that same regard in us, like, wow, the Black Americans, when they come here, they cash us out, you know, we like seeing them, we like seeing the Black British, you know. We can have that connotation because we're generous and we're taking care of them, or we're friendly, and you know, those kind of things. So we have to kind of be the change we want to see.
Amazing. I was just going to ask you, finally, what would be your last word to like the diaspora, as in like, why they should set their sights back home? So if you was to meet someone of the diaspora outside and they're like, well, I've heard you speak about the wonders of the motherland, but I just can't see it, and why should I set my eyes back home?
I would say my final word would be, what is the alternative? You know, that would be the question that I pose to them. Do you want to continue to exist in the way that we have been in these lands, or do you want to take what is potentially out there for us in the motherland? And, you know, we have a long history of being in these countries and enduring what we have been enduring. And it's not changing. You know, there's no measures in place that will make it change, and they don't want to make a change. So that would be my final word, is what is the alternative? If we don't go home, what is the alternative? Yeah,
that's amazing. I would say, so I always believe like every opportunity that we have as human beings, and even our very existence, is off the back of someone else's suffering. It's off the back of someone else's sacrifice. And I think the key thing is, when it comes to the diaspora and looking back home, is to realize the sacrifice of those who came before you, and then using that as fuel for you to then enable for that to encourage you and spark something in you for you to give something back. Like, we're not saying necessarily everyone has to go back, but I feel like everyone has to look back and give something back, because you're standing on the shoulders of their sacrifices and their work. So that to me is the key element, because I know there's loads of people that they'll struggle back home. There's loads of people that have no use back home. There's loads of people that are so far gone that it might even be damaging to them mentally if they even look back home. But you can contribute without necessarily forcing yourself to do something that you're incapable of doing. And that's what I would say, because back home is beautiful. Back home is great. We're both great testaments to that. And I smile whenever I think about Ghana now. I'm not that 16-year-old kid that's thinking, oh, oh, what, do we have to go back to Ghana this year? What are we going to do there? Like, I'm just going to chill in grandmother's house. And just like, now I'm like, yo, when's the next flight? I'm on Skyscanner trying to look for the cheapest flight because I want to be back there. I get that sense of joy and that upliftment in spirit. So it's a beautiful thing. And eventually I want to go back, and I'm developing something right now at the moment. I've got a massive piece of land that I'm developing apartments and
wow.
Yeah, me and some family members, we're doing stuff back there.
Wow, congratulations, mate.
Thank you. And I look forward to that project more than I look forward to anything else, because I know at the end of the day, it's going to benefit others and benefit me, and it's benefiting the whole of a country as a whole. In a way, I'm contributing.
You're contributing, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, it's been great speaking to you, actually, because I mean, I didn't know what to expect initially. I knew what the title was, and then also having lived it, I felt like it would be organic, which it has turned out to be.
Yes.
And then we both share the same joy for Africa, and particularly Ghana in my case. And I can't wait to see what happens in the next coming decades. And I just pray and hope that this whole season that we're going through of coronavirus will just hurry up and disappear, and we can go back to normality, and we can go back to doing what we do best. And
absolutely.
I
mean, and thanks for having me. I mean, again, we've been trying to connect for some time.
I know.
I'm really happy, and I appreciate what you're doing with your media. You know, those of us that actually put ourselves out there, we are the face. You know, we are the representatives of this movement and this ideology. So big shout outs to you and your audience.
Thank you, African Superstar. It's been a pleasure. We're definitely going to catch up again.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Enjoy the rest of your day. Have a fantastic
day.
Bye.